Riverside never made the headlines. This quiet town in Indiana, with a population of just over 15,000, lived the measured life of a typical American town. Everyone knew their neighbors, and the most dramatic event in recent years had been the theft of a bicycle from the high school, until the day when everything changed forever. Monica Stone woke up every morning at 6:30 in her small apartment on the outskirts of town. The 28-year-old woman led a double life with such care that even her younger brother Mark had no idea about the whole truth. To her neighbors and acquaintances, she was simply Monica, a girl who worked as an administrator at a local law firm and was saving money to go to law school. But in the evenings, she transformed into Scarlett, a high-class escort whose services were in demand among a certain category of men in Riverside. That morning, Monica stood in front of the mirror, tying her hair into a strict bun. Her reflection showed an attractive woman with intelligent eyes and a determined chin. She had learned to hide her fatigue under a thin layer of makeup, and to hide her disappointment at the life she had been forced to choose behind a professional smile. "One more year, 2 at most," she whispered to herself every morning like a mantra. The money she earned as Scarlett was supposed to pay for her tuition at a prestigious law school. Then she could leave this life behind and become what she had always dreamed of being, a successful lawyer. Monica's apartment was modest but tidy. 2 chairs at a small table, a sofa she had bought at a thrift store, a TV, and bookshelves filled with law textbooks. On the refrigerator was a photograph of her and Mark as children, hugging on the porch of their grandmother's house. They had no parents. Her mother had died of a drug overdose when Monica was 16, and they had never known their father. At 8 in the morning, Monica was already sitting at her desk at Harrison Associates, a small but respected law firm on Main Street. Her boss, an elderly lawyer named Tom Harrison, treated her like a daughter and often told her she was too smart to be an administrative assistant. "Monica, you really should think about law school," he said as he walked past her desk with a cup of coffee in his hand. "You have everything it takes to be a successful lawyer." She smiled without looking up from her documents. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I'm working on it." If only he knew how she was working on it. In another part of town, in an elegant mansion on Elm Street, District Attorney Jasper Milton was waking up. At 45, he was the epitome of a successful American official, a tall, graying man with piercing eyes and confident manners. His home reflected his status: 2 stories, a manicured lawn, 2 cars in the garage, and a wife who taught at the local high school. Judith Milton was preparing breakfast in the kitchen when her husband came downstairs in a strict gray suit. The 42-year-old woman was attractive in a modest, homely way. Her chestnut hair was neatly styled, and her face wore the familiar smile of a politician's wife. "Don't forget we're having dinner with the Johnsons tonight," she reminded him as she poured him a cup of coffee. Jasper nodded, glancing at the morning news on his tablet. "Of course. What time?" 7. "I've got everything ready." Judith sat down opposite her husband, studying his face. In recent months, she had noticed a certain aloofness in him, as if his thoughts were preoccupied with something important that he couldn't tell her about. "Jasper, is everything okay? You seem tense lately." He looked up from his tablet and smiled gently. "Just a lot of work, honey. The campaign for State Attorney General requires my full attention." That was true, but it was far from the whole truth. Jasper was indeed planning to run for a higher office, but in recent months, he had been tormented by the fear that certain aspects of his personal life might become public knowledge, a fear that grew stronger with each passing day. On the other side of town, at Joe's Auto Repair, Mark Stone had been working on an old Chevrolet for 2 hours. At 25, he looked older. Working as a mechanic and battling drug addiction had left their mark on his face. But he had golden hands, and the locals trusted him with their cars. The shop owner, 60-year-old Joe Baker, treated Mark like a son. He knew about the young man's problems, but he also saw his potential. "Mark, Mrs. Anderson is coming by today to pick up her car. Make sure everything is perfect," Joe said, wiping his hands on an oily rag. "No problem, boss." Mark didn't look up, continuing to work. Work was his salvation, the only place where he could forget his demons and focus on something concrete and understandable. But even at work, his thoughts often returned to his sister. Monica had always been a role model for him. Smart, determined, caring. She had literally pulled him out of a drug addiction several years ago, paid for his rehab, and supported him during his relapses. Mark knew that his sister worked at a law firm, but he also suspected that she had some other source of income. Too often he saw things she couldn't afford on an administrative salary. Monty always knew how to get by, he thought as he tightened the bolt. But sometimes he wondered at what cost. That evening, Detective Sarah Collins sat in her office at the Riverside Police Department, sorting through paperwork from a recently closed burglary case. At 38, she was one of the most experienced detectives in the city, even though she had only been with the local police for 5 years. She had previously served with the Indianapolis Police Department, but divorce and a desire for a fresh start had brought her to Riverside. Sarah was a woman of average height, with short dark hair and attentive eyes that didn't miss a thing. Her colleagues respected her for her professionalism and integrity, although some considered her too principled. She didn't drink beer with them after work and rarely participated in office gossip. "Collins, you can go home," said Sergeant Dave Thompson, peeking into her office. "It's a quiet night." "Just a few more minutes," Sarah replied, without looking up from her documents. She preferred to finish her work the same day, rather than put it off until tomorrow. At home, all that awaited her was an empty apartment and a bottle of wine, which she sometimes allowed herself to drink to help her fall asleep. The divorce had been difficult, and Sarah still hadn't fully recovered from her ex-husband's betrayal. Work was her refuge, a place where she felt needed and competent. Meanwhile, at the Milton home, a dinner party was underway with the Johnsons, a local banker and his wife. Judith played the role of the perfect politician's wife, charming the guests with stories about her students and plans for a charity fair. Jasper made small talk, but his mind was far away. He glanced at his phone, waiting for a message. It arrived at 9:30, short but clear. "Tomorrow, same place, same time." He quickly deleted the message and returned to the conversation about the city's development plans, but his hands were shaking slightly. "Everything okay, dear?" Judith asked, noticing his unease. "Sure, just work stuff." He squeezed her hand and smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. After the guests left, Judith cleaned up the kitchen, thinking about her husband's behavior. In recent months, Jasper had become secretive. He had been receiving calls that made him go into another room. He had expenses he couldn't explain, and sometimes she found strange receipts in his things from places he said he hadn't been to. Maybe it's just pre-election stress, she thought as she loaded the dishes into the dishwasher. But a mother's heart told her that something more was going on. Late that night, Monica sat in her apartment, poring over constitutional law textbooks. Her laptop was open on the table, with tabs open to law school websites. She dreamed of attending Northwestern University, but that required not only excellent grades, but also money. A lot of money. Her phone vibrated. A message from a client for tomorrow. Monica sighed and closed her textbook. Another night as Scarlet, another step toward her dream. She had long since stopped thinking of these meetings as anything personal. It was just a job, a means to an end. But lately, some clients had started to cross the line. They wanted more than just company for the evening. They wanted to feel important, influential. They wanted someone to depend on them. And Monica began to realize that this dependence could be her strength. Outside the window, Riverside was falling asleep. Streetlights illuminated empty sidewalks, and only occasionally did late-night cars pass by. No one suspected that a tragedy was brewing in this quiet town, one that would destroy the lives of several people and expose the dark secrets hidden behind a facade of respectability. People slept in their homes, each carrying their own burdens of secrets and fears. And no one knew that tomorrow would be the beginning of a chain of events that would change Riverside forever. A week had passed since that evening when Jasper Milton struggled to maintain his composure at dinner with the Johnsons. Now he sat in his office in the district attorney's building, reviewing cases, but his mind was elsewhere. His smartphone lay on the table, and every time the screen lit up with a notification, Jasper's heart skipped a beat. "Mr. Milton, Detective Collins is here to see you," his secretary announced over the intercom. Jasper sat up straight in his chair. "Send her in." Sarah Collins entered the office with a folder under her arm. She was dressed in a strict dark suit, her hair pulled back, her gaze focused and businesslike. "Prosecutor Milton, I have some questions about the South Street drug trafficking case. I need your advice on bringing charges." For the next 20 minutes, they discussed the details of the case. Jasper tried to concentrate on the conversation, but he couldn't help noticing how insightful the detective's questions were. Sarah Collins was clearly not someone who was satisfied with superficial answers. "Thanks for your advice," she said, gathering her papers. "By the way, there have been several reports of suspicious activity on the north side of town lately. Nothing concrete, but people are talking about strange cars and late-night meetings. It might be worth looking into." Jasper nodded, trying to look interested but not too much. "Of course, Detective. Keep me posted." After Sarah left, he closed the office door and took out his phone. The northern outskirts were where the small Pine Grove Motel was located, where he had met Scarlett. If the police were starting to pay attention to that area, at the same time, Monica was finishing her day at Harrison Associates. She was methodically sorting documents into folders when her personal phone rang, the one only a select few clients knew about. "Scarlett speaking," she answered in a low voice, making sure Mr. Harrison couldn't hear. "We need to meet today. There are things we need to discuss." The voice was familiar. One of her regular clients, a middle-aged man who always paid well and never caused any trouble. "Of course. The usual place at 8? "Yes. And Scarlett, bring that little notebook you sometimes take out. I think it's time for a more serious conversation." Monica frowned. "A notebook?" She never took notes during client meetings. That was one of her ironclad rules. But then she realized what he was talking about. A few months ago, she had started to study her clients more closely, gathering information about their lives, their work, their families. Not out of curiosity, but out of self-preservation. In her line of work, you never knew when information might come in handy. "Okay," she said. "See you later." After the conversation, Monica sat down at her desk and opened a drawer. In the far corner, hidden behind stationery, lay a small notebook. In it, she wrote down details about her clients, their habits, fears, family situations, professional ambitions. Things they told her in moments of candor, thinking that the information would die with them in a motel room. She knew it was a dangerous game, but she also knew that in a world where she was the most vulnerable party, information was her only protection. At Joe's Auto Repair, Mark Stone was working on a truck engine when he heard a familiar voice. "Mark, hi! I haven't seen you in ages." He looked up from under the hood and saw Lisa Johnson, the banker's daughter he had dated in high school. Now she worked as an administrator at a hospital and was married to a gym teacher. "Hi, Liz. How's it going?" Mark wiped his hands on his overalls, feeling a little awkward. Lisa represented the life he could have had if it weren't for drugs and all his other mistakes. "Everything's fine. Listen, I saw your sister downtown the other day. She looked very elegant." "New job?" Mark perked up. "She works at a law firm, nothing new." "I see. She was just wearing a very expensive dress, and I thought—" Lisa fell silent, realizing she was touching on a sensitive subject. "Never mind. Say hi to her for me." After she left, Mark couldn't concentrate on his work. An expensive dress? Monica always dressed modestly and bought her clothes in ordinary stores. Where did she get the money for expensive clothes? In the evening, he decided to stop by his sister's place. Monica opened the door in her bathrobe, her hair damp from the shower. "Mark, what are you doing here?" "Just wanted to see you. Can I come in?" She hesitated for a second, then stepped aside. "Of course. Would you like some coffee?" While Monica was making coffee, Mark looked around the apartment. An elegant black dress hung on the coat rack, clearly worth more than a month's salary for an administrator. Expensive perfume and cosmetics lay on the dressing table. "Monica, is everything okay? Financially, I mean." She froze, holding the coffee cups in her hands. "What do you mean?" "Lisa Johnson saw you in an expensive dress, and here I see things that—" He didn't finish his sentence, but the meaning was clear. Monica put the cups on the table and sat down opposite her brother. "Mark, I got a bonus at work. Mr. Harrison is very pleased with my work, and I decided to spend a little money on myself. It's okay." He studied her face. Monica had always been a poor liar, but now she looked him straight in the eye with a sincere expression. "Okay," he said finally. "Just be careful, okay? There have been some strange things happening in town lately." "What kind of strange things?" "I'm not sure, but Joe said the police have increased patrols in some areas. Also, I've heard rumors that some respected citizens aren't being entirely honest." After Mark left, Monica sat by the window for a long time, sipping her cold coffee. Her brother didn't believe her explanation. She could see it in his eyes. Sooner or later, she would have to tell him the truth. But for now, she hoped she could save enough money and get out of this business before anyone found out her secret. At 7:30, she was ready for her meeting. Black dress, minimal jewelry, elegant makeup. Scarlett was a completely different person. Confident, mysterious, unapproachable. The Pine Grove Motel was located on the outskirts of town, surrounded by pine trees. It was clean and discreet, the perfect place for meetings that had to remain secret. Monica parked her car in the far corner of the parking lot and walked to room 12. The client was already waiting for her. He was a man in his 50s, wearing an expensive suit with graying hair and tired eyes. She knew him as Mr. Gray, although she suspected that wasn't his real name. "Scarlett, thank you for coming." He looked nervous, which was unusual for him. "Of course. Did you want to talk?" He poured himself a whiskey from a small bottle and offered her a glass of wine. "Scarlett, I know you're a smart girl, observant, and I know you sometimes remember details about the people you meet." Monica took a cautious sip of wine. "I don't understand what you're talking about, but I think you do. Listen, I don't want to cause any problems for you or myself, but if you know anything about me, my work, my family, my plans, I'd be willing to compensate you for your silence." The room fell silent. Monica realized that this was a turning point. She could pretend she didn't understand what he was talking about and continue seeing him as usual. Or she could admit that she did gather information about her clients. "What kind of compensation do you have in mind?" she finally asked. Relief washed over his face. "Let's say an extra $1,000 a month for your discretion." $1,000 a month. That would greatly accelerate her plans to go to law school. But it also meant taking her relationship with her clients to a whole new level. "I need to think about it," she said. "Of course, but don't think too long, and Scarlett isn't the only one who might be interested in such an arrangement." After the meeting, Monica drove home thinking about what had happened. Mr. Gray had opened up new opportunities for her, but also new dangers. If one client was willing to pay for her silence, there were probably others. But what if one of them decided that silence could be bought not only with money, but with more radical means? Meanwhile, Detective Sarah Collins sat in her car in the parking lot of a 24-hour store, filling out her patrol report. It was almost 10 o'clock in the evening, and the streets of Riverside were deserted. She noticed an elegant black car driving by, unusually expensive for this neighborhood. Out of professional curiosity, she wrote down the license plate number. In a small town, details matter, and you never know what might come in handy in the future. At the Milton home, Judith sat at the kitchen table, checking her students' tests. Jasper was supposed to be back from a work meeting an hour ago, but he hadn't returned. She tried to call him, but his phone was off. When she heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway, it was already 10:30. Jasper entered the house quietly, obviously hoping his wife was already asleep. "How was the meeting?" Judith asked, without looking up from the notebooks. Jasper froze in the kitchen doorway. "Long, very long. Department budget issues. At 10 o'clock at night? You know how it is with politics. Sometimes you have to meet at inconvenient times." Judith finally looked up. "Jasper, I don't know what's going on, but I can see you're not telling me the truth. If you have problems—" "No problems," he replied quickly. "Just a lot of work." He kissed her on the top of her head and went upstairs. Judith remained sitting at the table studying her test papers, but the words on the pages blurred before her eyes. Her husband was lying to her, and she knew it as surely as she knew the sun would rise tomorrow. Late at night, Monica lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Thoughts of Mr. Gray's offer were spinning around in her head. $1,000 a month for her silence. If she could find 3 or 4 more clients willing to pay that, she could go to law school next year. But something told her that this path would lead to a very dark place, a place from which there might be no escape. Outside the window, Riverside slept peacefully, unaware that a story was brewing in its quiet streets that would soon shake everyone to their core. 2 weeks had passed since her conversation with Mr. Gray, and Monica had made her decision. She sat in the Main Street Cafe with a notebook hidden under the menu, reviewing her notes. Over the years, she had gathered information about 12 regular customers, their fears, ambitions, family secrets, and professional vulnerabilities. Dr. William Hayes, a heart surgeon at the local hospital, was afraid his wife would find out about his gambling addiction. Mayor Robert Clark was hiding from his constituents that his son had been arrested for drug dealing in college. Businessman David Richards was cheating his partners in his construction company. And Mr. Gray, who, as she now knew, was none other than District Attorney Jasper Milton. Monica had accidentally discovered his true identity a month ago when she saw his photo in the local newspaper. The article was about his plans to run for state attorney general. The handsome, confident man in the photo bore little resemblance to the nervous client she knew as Mr. Gray, but the eyes were the same. Now she understood his nervousness. A man with such political ambitions couldn't afford a scandal. Her phone vibrated. A message from Dr. Hayes. "Can we meet today? I have a proposal that will interest you." Monica smiled. Her second client in 2 weeks willing to discuss special conditions. Rumors spread quickly in their closed circle. At the police station, Detective Sarah Collins studied a map of the city, marking places where suspicious activity had recently been reported. The Pine Grove Motel appeared too often in the reports. "Something's not right about that place," she muttered, making notes in her notebook. Sergeant Thompson looked over her shoulder. "Problems with the motel?" "Possibly. Too many expensive cars for a place that markets itself as budget-friendly, and strange hours of activity." "You think drugs? Or something else? I want to set up surveillance for a couple of nights." Thompson nodded. "Do what you think is best, but be careful. We don't want to cause trouble for local business owners without good reason." Sarah understood the hint. In a small town, you had to be careful with influential people, but her police intuition rarely failed her. At the auto repair shop, Mark was finishing up work on Mayor Clark's sedan when the mayor himself came to pick up his car. Robert Clark was a short, heavy-set man in his 50s with nervous mannerisms and sweaty palms. "All done, Mr. Clark," Mark said, wiping his hands. "Excellent, excellent." The mayor paid in cash, which was unusual. He usually used his corporate card. "Tell me, Mark, you're friends with Tom from The Independent, aren't you?" Mark frowned. Tom Wilson was a journalist for the local newspaper and an old friend from school. "Yes, we know each other. Why?" "Just that if he asks questions about, well, the personal lives of local residents, it would be good if someone explained to him the importance of discretion in a small community." Mark didn't understand what the mayor was getting at, but he nodded. After he left, he thought long and hard about this strange conversation. Why was the mayor concerned about what the local newspaper might write? Meanwhile, Judith Milton stood in her bedroom, holding her husband's credit card. She had found it in his jacket pocket when she took his clothes to the dry cleaners. The statement showed regular payments to the Pine Grove Motel, every 2 weeks for the past 6 months. Judith's heart ached. She had always feared this moment, but hoped her suspicions were unfounded. Now she had proof that her husband was cheating on her. She sat down on the bed they had shared for 20 years and tried to decide what to do next. Should she confront him? Hire a private investigator? Or just keep quiet and hope it would blow over? The sound of the front door opening interrupted her thoughts. Jasper was home. "Judy, where are you?" he called from the hall. "Upstairs," she replied, quickly hiding the statement in a drawer. Jasper went up to the bedroom with a smile on his face, but Judith noticed the tension in his eyes. "How are you, dear?" "Fine. How about you? How was your day?" "The usual, lots of paperwork." He began to unbutton his tie, avoiding her gaze. By the way, I have to meet with the campaign team tonight. We're planning our strategy for next month. A lie. Judith knew it with absolute certainty. He didn't have a meeting. He had a date at the Pine Grove Motel. Okay, she said quietly. See you later. After he left, she sat in her dark bedroom for a long time, thinking about how her life had fallen apart, and she hadn't even noticed. At 8 o'clock that evening, Monica met Dr. Hayes in the same motel room. William Hayes was an elegant man in his early 50s, with graying temples and the steady hands of a surgeon. But tonight, those hands trembled slightly as he poured himself a whiskey. Scarlett, I hear you offer special services to certain clients. Monica studied his face. What exactly have you heard, doctor? That you're willing to provide discretion for an additional fee. That depends on what needs to be kept secret. Hayes downed his whiskey in one gulp. My wife thinks I'm working late at the hospital. She doesn't know about our meetings, but she also doesn't know about my financial difficulties. Gambling? His eyes widened in surprise. How did you know? You talk a lot during our meetings, doctor. About stress, about debts, about how you sometimes stop by the casino on your way home. Hayes lowered his head. I owe the hospital $200,000. I took out loans against my medical equipment. If anyone finds out, you'll lose your license and go to jail, Monica finished. Plus, your wife will find out about everything, the debts and our meetings. Exactly. That's why I'm willing to pay for your silence. Let's say $1,500 a month? Monica hid her satisfaction. $1,500 plus $1,000 from Jasper. That was $2,500 in extra income per month. That's a fair amount, she agreed. After her meeting with Dr. Hayes, Monica felt a rush of adrenaline. She was beginning to understand the power that the information she had gathered gave her. These men, so confident and influential in their normal lives, became helpless when their secrets were threatened. But with power came danger. She understood that. At 9:30, her phone rang. Jasper Milton. We need to talk, he said without preamble. Today, right away. Sure. Same place? No. Meet me in the parking lot by the old mill. In half an hour. Something in his voice alarmed Monica. He didn't sound like himself. There was desperation in his voice and something else. Fear? Anger? The old mill was located on the outskirts of town, in an abandoned industrial area. The place was deserted and poorly lit, not the safest choice for a late-night meeting. Monica arrived first and waited in her car with the engine running. 10 minutes later, Jasper pulled up in his dark sedan. He got out of the car and walked over to her window. Get out. We need to talk face to face. Monica hesitated, but then got out of the car. Jasper looked agitated. His hair was tousled, his tie was loose, and his eyes were red from fatigue or alcohol. Scarlett, this game has gone too far. What game? Don't pretend. I know what you're doing. You're gathering information about clients and then blackmailing them. Hayes already told me about your conversation. Monica took a step back. I'm just offering additional services to those who value discretion. Call it what you want, but it's blackmail, and it has to stop. Why? Because you're afraid your wife will find out? Or because it might interfere with your political ambitions? Jasper took a step toward her, and Monica saw something dangerous in his eyes. Because I won't let some girl ruin everything I've worked for my entire life. I'm not a girl, and I'm not going to ruin your life. I just want you to pay for my silence. And if I refuse, Monica took out her phone. I have photos of us together, recordings of our conversations, detailed information about your preferences. Do you think the voters will forgive their future attorney general for having an affair with a prostitute? Jasper turned pale. You've been recording our meetings? Insurance, Monica replied calmly. You have to be careful in my line of work. How much do you want? $5,000 a month until the end of the election campaign. After you win, $3,000 for life. That's extortion. It's business. Jasper was silent for a long minute, studying her face in the dim light of the street lamp. And if I say no, then tomorrow morning the local newspaper will receive a very interesting package. You wouldn't dare. Try me. The tension between them was almost palpable. Monica felt she had crossed some invisible line. This was no longer a game, it was war. "I need time to think," Jasper said finally. "You have 24 hours. I'll expect your answer tomorrow at this time." Jasper turned and walked toward his car, but stopped and turned back. "Scarlett, do you realize you're playing with fire?" "I realize I'm playing for survival." After he left, Monica stood in the empty parking lot for a long time, thinking about what had happened. She knew she had made Jasper her enemy, but she also knew it was too late to back down. That same night, Detective Sarah Collins sat in her car on a hill overlooking the Pine Grove Motel, watching through binoculars. She saw an elegant woman meet a middle-aged man, then an hour later, another man. Both men looked nervous and kept looking around. "Definitely not drugs," she muttered into her voice recorder. "Maybe high-class prostitution. I need more information." She wrote down the license plate numbers and decided to check them in the database tomorrow. At home, Judith Milton lay in bed pretending to be asleep when Jasper returned home at 11:30. He went straight to the bathroom, and she heard the shower running. When he lay down next to her, he smelled of soap, as if he were trying to wash off the scent of someone else's perfume. Judith closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but her thoughts kept her awake. In the morning, she was going to confront her husband. 20 years of marriage deserved an honest conversation. Meanwhile, in her apartment, Monica sat at the table, calculating the possible proceeds from blackmail. $5,000 from Jasper, $1,500 from Dr. Hayes, and she was sure that Mayor Clark would soon show interest in discretion, plus a few more clients who might be interested. By the end of the year, she could save enough not only for law school, but also for a comfortable life while she was studying. Thursday morning, March 15th, began with fog that enveloped Riverside in a thick gray blanket. Monica woke up with a heavy feeling, but pushed the gloomy thoughts away. Today was the day Jasper was supposed to give her an answer, and she was sure he would agree to her terms. He simply had no choice. At the police station, Detective Sarah Collins was studying the results of the license plate checks she had made the night before. One belonged to Dr. Hayes, another to Mayor Clark. The third was registered to a Monica Stone who lived on Beach Street. "Interesting," Sarah muttered, making notes in her notebook. She decided to do a little investigation into these people, starting with Monica Stone. A family drama was unfolding at the Milton home. Judith was waiting for her husband in the kitchen with a bank statement in her hands. When Jasper came down for breakfast, she silently placed the documents in front of him. "Pine Grove Motel," she said quietly. "Every 2 weeks, 6 months. Jasper turned pale as he looked at the papers. "Judy, I can explain." 20 years of marriage," his wife interrupted. 20 years I believed in you, supported your career, was the perfect politician's wife. And this is how you repay me? It's not what you think. Then what is it? Judith's voice trembled with suppressed tears. What could be in a motel but an affair? Jasper sat down opposite his wife, realizing that lying would no longer help. It's complicated. You're sleeping with another woman. What's complicated about that? Judy, please. He reached out to her, but she pulled away. I want you to move out. Today. Until I decide what to do next. You can't be serious. The election campaign. Your campaign is your problem. My marriage is my problem, and I think it's over. Jasper stood up from the table, realizing that his world was falling apart at a catastrophic speed. First Scarlett's blackmail, now divorce. His political ambitions were turning to ashes. I have to go to work, he said finally. We'll talk tonight. No, we won't. You won't be here tonight. At the auto repair shop, Mark received an unexpected visit from Tom Wilson, a reporter for the local newspaper. Tom was a thin man in his 30s with a sharp gaze and perpetually tousled hair. Mark, I need your help, Tom said, looking around to make sure no one could hear them. What's going on? I'm working on a story about corruption among local officials. I have information that several influential people in town are leading double lives. Mark frowned. And what does that have to do with me? Your sister works at a law firm. She might hear things, know details. Plus, Tom hesitated. Plus, I've seen her a few times in the company of men who are out of her league, if you know what I mean. What are you getting at? Mark's voice turned cold. Nothing bad. Just think she might know more than she lets on. After Tom left, Mark couldn't concentrate on his work. The reporter's words echoed in his head. What if his suspicions about his sister were justified? What if Monica was really involved in something dangerous? At the district attorney's office, Jasper tried to focus on his work, but his thoughts kept returning to Scarlett's ultimatum. $5,000 a month. Where would he get that kind of money? And even if he did, what would prevent her from raising the stakes in the future? He took out his phone and dialed a familiar number. Scarlett, it's me. Jasper, I hope you have an answer. Yes, let's meet tonight. We need to discuss the details. Great. Same place at 8? Jasper hesitated. No, there's been too much attention on the motel lately. Let's meet at the old warehouse by the railroad tracks. You know the place? I do. Okay, 8 o'clock tonight. After the call, Jasper sat in his office, staring at a family photo on his desk. Judith smiled at him from the picture, so young and happy on their wedding day. Now it was all gone. He opened the desk drawer and took out a small revolver, a gift from his father, when he was just starting his career as a prosecutor. For protection, the old man had said. We have many enemies in our line of work. Jasper never thought he would have to use it. In the afternoon, Detective Sarah decided to pay a visit to Monica Stone. She arrived at the Harrison Partners office under the pretext of consulting on an old case. Miss Stone? She asked the girl at the reception desk. Monica looked up from her computer. Yes, that's me. How can I help you? Detective Collins, Riverside Police Department. I have a few questions about a theft case we investigated last month. Your firm represented one of the witnesses. It was a lie, but Sarah wanted to see how the girl would react. Monica looked calm, but the detective noticed her slight tension. Of course, what case? A burglary on Oak Street. Was Mr. Johnson your client? I'll need to check our files. Can you wait a minute? While Monica pretended to look for information, Sarah studied her. Attractive, intelligent, but there was something about her that was unsettling. The girl was too composed for a typical administrative assistant. I'm sorry, but I don't see that case in our records, Monica said after a few minutes. That's strange. Maybe I got the last name wrong. Sarah left her business card. If you remember anything, give me a call. After the detective left, Monica stared at the business card for a long time. The police were starting to take an interest. That was bad. Very bad. In the evening, as the sun disappeared behind the horizon, painting the sky in shades of red, Monica drove to the old warehouse. The place was even more isolated than the mill, an abandoned industrial building surrounded by vacant lots and railroad tracks. She parked next to the warehouse and looked around. Jasper's car wasn't there yet. Monica checked her phone. No messages. Maybe he was running late. 10 minutes later, the familiar sedan appeared. Jasper got out of the car and headed toward her. Even in the dim light, Monica could see that he looked worse than usual, exhausted, with red eyes and disheveled hair. Well, Jasper, what's your decision? He stopped a few steps away from her. Scarlett, let's talk like reasonable people. We already talked. I told you my price. $5,000 a month is too much. I can't explain that kind of expense. Then find a way, or your wife and your constituents will find out the truth. Jasper took a step closer. My wife already knows. She kicked me out of the house this morning. Monica felt a slight uneasiness. If Jasper's wife already knew about the affair, his motivation to pay for her silence was greatly reduced. Nevertheless, there are still voters. An attorney general who sleeps with prostitutes is unlikely to get many votes. What if I tell the voters that I was the victim of blackmail, that a prostitute tried to extort money from me with threats? I have proof of our meetings, photos, recordings. The evidence can be destroyed. Something in his voice made Monica take a step back. What do you mean? Jasper took a revolver out of his pocket. I mean this game ends today. Monica felt the blood drain from her face. Jasper, don't be a fool. Murder will only make your problems worse. Not if no one catches me. A young prostitute found dead in an abandoned neighborhood. The police will think it was her pimp or a psychopathic client. What if I've already passed the information on to someone? If something happens to me, everything will come out? Jasper smiled, but there was no warmth in his smile. You're bluffing. If you had insurance, you would have mentioned it. Monica realized he was right. She relied solely on her caution and ability to manipulate people. But now she was standing in front of a man who had been driven to despair. Jasper, think about it. You're a prosecutor. You have a reputation, a career, which you're trying to destroy. I just want money for school. It's not personal. It's very personal to me. Monica tried to back away toward her car, but Jasper blocked her way. Please, she said, and for the first time, fear could be heard in her voice. We can work something out. I'll lower the price, $1,000 a month, $500. It's too late. Jasper raised the gun, and Monica saw in his eyes the madness of a man with nothing to lose. Jasper, don't do it! The shot rang out in the night, echoing off the walls of the abandoned warehouse. Monica fell to the asphalt, her eyes wide with surprise. Blood slowly spread beneath her body. Jasper stood over her for a few seconds, still holding the smoking revolver. Then the reality of what had happened dawned on him. He had just killed a man. His hands were shaking as he put the gun back in his pocket. He had to think, plan. He couldn't afford to panic. Jasper searched Monica's body, taking her phone and wallet. Then he rummaged through her car, finding a notebook with information about her clients. All of this had to be destroyed. An hour later, he was home. No, not home. The house no longer belonged to him. He checked into a motel on the other side of town, far from Pine Grove and its compromising memories. In his room, he methodically destroyed everything connected to Scarlett. He burned the notebook and smashed her phone with a hammer he found in the trunk of his car. He took the revolver apart and threw the pieces away in different places along the road. But even after destroying all the evidence, Jasper couldn't get rid of the image of Monica lying on the asphalt with her eyes wide open. He had killed a person, a young woman who was just trying to change her life. At 3 in the morning, he threw up in the motel bathroom. At 4, he took a shower, trying to wash away the smell of gunpowder and blood that seemed to have seeped into his skin. At 5, he went to bed, but sleep would not come. Meanwhile, in an abandoned industrial area, Monica Stone's body lay under the stars, waiting for dawn and for someone to discover it. Early in the morning, around 6 o'clock, a homeless man named Frank, who sometimes slept in abandoned buildings, found the body. He immediately ran to the nearest payphone and called the police. Detective Sarah Collins was one of the first to arrive at the crime scene. She stood over the body of the young woman she had seen yesterday at the law firm and realized that her intuition about suspicious activity in the city had been correct. "Call for a medical examiner," she said to Sergeant Thompson, "and secure the crime scene. We have a murder." Sarah crouched down next to the body, studying the details. One shot to the chest from close range, professional, without excessive brutality. The wallet and phone were missing, but expensive jewelry remained untouched. This was not a robbery. "Someone really wanted you to shut up," the detective said quietly to the dead girl. "But the dead sometimes tell us more than the living." By 7 in the morning, news of the murder had spread throughout Riverside. In a small town, events like this become the main topic of conversation within hours. Mark Stone learned of his sister's death from Joe, who heard about it on the police radio. The young man collapsed to his knees right in the workshop, unable to believe what had happened. Jasper Milton learned of the murder from the morning news while sitting in his motel room with a cup of coffee in his trembling hands. Seeing his crime on the news was a surreal experience. The reporter spoke of the brutal murder of a young woman and the shock in the peaceful community. There was no turning back now. Jasper Milton was a murderer, and the only thing he could do was try to avoid punishment. It had been 3 days since Monica Stone's body had been discovered, and Detective Sarah Collins had been working almost non-stop. Her office had been turned into an investigation command center, with crime scene photos, diagrams, and interview notes covering the walls. "What do we have?" Sergeant Thompson asked as he entered with a cup of coffee. Sarah pointed to the board with the photos. Monica Stone, 28 years old, administrator at a law firm, officially. Unofficially, a high-class escort under the alias Scarlet. How can you be so sure? I spoke to her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. She saw Monica leaving in expensive dresses in the evenings and returning late at night. Plus, bank records show regular large cash deposits that don't match her official salary. Thompson nodded. Suspects? Here's the interesting part. Sarah walked over to another part of the board. I checked the cars that regularly showed up at the Pine Grove Motel. Dr. William Hayes, Mayor Robert Clark, and... She paused. District Attorney Jasper Milton. Milton? Are you sure? Absolutely. His car was caught on the motel's surveillance cameras every 2 weeks for the past 6 months. Thompson whistled. That blows his political career. If he's alive enough to have a career, Sarah replied grimly. At that moment, Jasper Milton sat in his office, trying to maintain a semblance of normality. The last 3 days had been hell. He had hardly slept. His hands were shaking constantly, and every sound made him jump. The secretary entered with some documents. Mr. Milton, Detective Collins is requesting a meeting. He says it's about the Monica Stone murder investigation. Jasper's heart skipped a beat. When? She's waiting in the reception area. Send her in, he said, trying to keep his voice calm. Sarah entered with a notepad and a voice recorder. Prosecutor Milton, thank you for taking the time. I know you're very busy. Of course, Detective. This is a terrible crime. How can I help you? I need to ask you a few questions about your movements on Thursday evening. Jasper felt his palms sweat. Thursday? I was at home with my wife. Interesting. Because I spoke to Mrs. Milton this morning. She said you left the house on Thursday after an argument and haven't been back since. A trap. Sarah knew the truth and was testing him to see if he would lie. I'm sorry, I got the days mixed up, Jasper said, trying to buy time. On Thursday evening, I was indeed somewhere else. Where exactly? At the Old Town Bar. I was drinking after an argument with my wife. Can anyone confirm that? I don't think so. I was alone. Sarah took notes, her face remaining neutral. Prosecutor Milton, did you know Monica Stone? No, I didn't. Does the name Scarlet mean anything to you? Jasper froze. How did she know about the pseudonym? No, it doesn't ring a bell. I see. Sarah closed her notebook. That's all for now, but I may contact you again if I have any further questions. After she left, Jasper locked himself in the bathroom and threw up. The detective knew more than she was letting on. He felt the noose tightening around his neck. On the other side of town, Mark Stone sat in his late sister's living room, sorting through her belongings. Joe had given him a week off, knowing the guy needed time to deal with his grief. Among Monica's books, he found a hidden notebook. His hands trembled as he opened it. The pages were filled with notes about different men, their habits, fears, family problems, code names, doctor, mayor, prosecutor. Mark realized that his worst suspicions had been confirmed. Monica was indeed working as an escort, and judging by the notes, she was also collecting dirt on her clients. One of them could have killed her. He took out his phone and dialed the police department. Detective Collins, this is Mark Stone. I need to meet with you. I have information about your sister. An hour later, Sarah was sitting in Monica's living room, studying the notebook. Mark, this is very important evidence. Why didn't you bring it earlier? I didn't know it existed. I only found it today. Mark looked devastated. I suspected Monica had secrets, but I didn't think... Don't blame yourself. Your sister was trying to change her life the only way she knew how. Sarah studied the notes. The information was detailed and compromising. Dr. Hayes and his gambling addiction, Mayor Clark and his son's problems, and the prosecutor, clearly Jasper Milton, with notes about his political ambitions and fears of scandal. One of them killed her, Mark said quietly. Maybe, but we need proof. The next day, Sarah decided to talk to Dr. Hayes. She found him at the hospital where he was finishing up surgery. Dr. Hayes, I need to ask you some questions about Monica Stone. Hayes turned pale. I don't know who you're talking about. Doctor, I know about your meetings at the motel and that you paid her to keep quiet about your debts. Hayes sat down on the nearest chair, his shoulders slumped. How did you find out? Monica had records, very detailed records. She was blackmailing me, the doctor admitted. She demanded $1,500 a month to keep quiet about my gambling problem. Where were you on Thursday night? At home with my wife. We were watching a movie. She can confirm that. And you didn't meet with Monica that day? No, I paid her on Monday and didn't plan to see her until next month. Sarah studied his face. The doctor looked scared, but not like a murderer. More like a man who was afraid of losing everything because of his weaknesses. Next was Mayor Clark. Sarah met him at City Hall. Mr. Clark, I am aware of your relationship with Monica Stone. The mayor tried to protest. I don't know what you're talking about. She had records of your son being arrested for drug dealing in college, and how you paid to have the case dropped. Clark slumped into his chair. That's true, but I didn't kill her. She blackmailed you? She tried, but I refused to pay. I said I'd rather confess publicly than dance to her tune. And how did she react? She got angry, said she'd find a way to make me pay, but that was 2 weeks ago. Sarah took notes. Another suspect with a motive, but the alibi had to be checked. That evening, she returned to Jasper Milton. This time she went to his home, the motel where he now lived. Mr. Milton, I have some more questions. Jasper led her into the room, realizing that refusing would look suspicious. I found Monica Stone's notebook, Sarah said without preamble. It contains detailed information about you, about your meetings, your fears, your political ambitions. Jasper felt the room begin to spin around him. She blackmailed you, didn't she? Sarah continued. Demanded money for her silence. Jasper couldn't find the words. On Thursday night, you didn't meet her at the bar. You met her near the old warehouse, and that's where you killed her. No, Jasper exclaimed. I didn't. I have a witness who saw your car in the area, Sarah lied. And ballistics will prove that the bullet came from your father's revolver, the one you keep in your office. Jasper collapsed onto the bed, his hands shaking uncontrollably. She was going to ruin my life, he whispered. She demanded $5,000 a month. For life. I had no choice. You always have a choice, Sarah said, pulling out handcuffs. Jasper Milton, you're under arrest for the murder of Monica Stone. When news of the prosecutor's arrest spread through Riverside, the city froze in shock. The man who was supposed to uphold the law had become a murderer. Judith Milton learned of her husband's arrest on the evening news. She sat in the empty house that had once been their family home and cried. Not for her murderous husband, but for the life that had been destroyed by lies and betrayal. Mark Stone was able to sleep peacefully for the first time in a week, knowing that his sister's killer had been found and arrested. Detective Sarah Collins sat in her office, filling out the last documents in the case. Justice had been served, but she felt no satisfaction. Too many lives had been destroyed. Monica was dead, Jasper was going to prison, and his family was ruined. A month later, Jasper Milton appeared in court. He confessed to the murder and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. At the trial, he gave his final statement. I don't ask for forgiveness for what I did. Monica Stone was a blackmailer and an extortionist, but that didn't give me the right to take her life. I destroyed not only her future, but mine and my family's future. That's the price of lies and weakness. After the trial, life in Riverside slowly began to return to normal, but the scars from this story remained forever. Mark Stone continued to work at the auto repair shop, but now he was also taking evening classes, trying to get the education his sister had dreamed of. Judith Milton filed for divorce and moved to another state to live with her sister, starting her life over. And in the house on Beach Street where Monica Stone once lived, the new residents knew nothing of the tragedy that had unfolded in their quiet town. They simply lived their lives, unaware that secrets and lies could lead to disaster. Monica Stone's story became a warning that the price of lies and corruption is always higher than it seems at first.